Just get up on your feet. Hey, we got a great time planned for you, but sound like this. Clap your hands with me. Alright, here we go. From the front to the back, hands up, hands up. Alright, come on, let's sing together. I saw Satan fall like lightning. I saw darkness run for cover. But the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. Come on. I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power. Still a miracle that I just can't get over. My name is registered in heaven. Come on. My praise belongs to you forever. Here we go. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Oh, oh. Together all ye children, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Our God will finish what He started. Our God will finish what He started. Here we go. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. All right, everyone, hands up like this. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Come on. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. Oh, this is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify. By Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Woo, woo, woo. All right, let's keep it going. God of Abraham, the God of covenant, faithfulness. Time and time again, you have proven you do just what you said. Though the storm may come
rising sun.
From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. Oh,
He's faithful through the ages. Would you guys stand up with us as we sing this next song?
There is healing in the power of the Lord Most High. There is courage in the shadow of His wings. There is peace unending over all my life. There is freedom that washes over me. I find all I need here in your presence, Lord. I open up my soul and you fill me up with all I need here in your presence, Lord, where blessings overflow. There's always abundantly more. There is rest. There is rest in the goodness of the Lord my God. There is treasure in the kindness of my King. There is comfort in knowing your unfailing love. My provider, you set my spirit free. I find all I need here in your presence, Lord. I open up my soul and you fill me up with all I need here in your presence, Lord, where blessings overflow. There's always abundantly more. More than I could ask or see, more than I could fathom. God, your love for me is better than I imagined. Sing this! More than I could ask or see, more than I could fathom. God, your love for me is better than I imagined. More than I could ask or see, more than I could fathom. God, your love for me is better than I imagined. Oh, oh, oh. I find all I need here in your presence, Lord. I open up my soul and you fill me up with all I need here in your presence, Lord, where blessings overflow. There's always abundantly more. More than I could ask or see, more than I could fathom. God, your love for me is better than I imagined. More than I could ask or see, more than I could fathom. God, your love for me is better than I imagined. Better than I imagined.
All right, let's pray. God, thank you for this day. Thank you just for this time that we have together just to celebrate you. Just to celebrate your love and the peace that you bring us and the new life you bring to us no matter where we are. So God, our hope is that ultimately we would know and understand and take hold of the idea that there's always more in you. And whatever we feel like fulfills us, whatever we feel like we need, God, you give us more than that and more than we could ever imagine. So God, we love you, we thank you. In your holy name we pray, amen. You guys may have a seat.
Of all like the major holidays, 4th of July is actually the one, this number 2 anyway, Christmas is the first, but the number 2 holiday that when I look back on my childhood, I have the best memories of. I love Christmas like anybody loves Christmas, any kid loves Christmas. I used to love running downstairs, opening presents, all that. But I have some great memories of the 4th of July. We used to go over to my grandma and grandpa's house. They lived maybe a mile, 2 miles from where we lived, and they had a big lot and a half their house was on. So they had a great big backyard with a pool and a grass area where you would set up like a volleyball court. They had this cool pool deck, and they had a little rumpus room that had a pool table. And we would go over there, and my mom was one of 7 kids, so it was a big family, and a lot of people would go, and we'd spend the day barbecuing and having fun and swimming and playing games. And then at night, we would light off fireworks. And the cool thing I remember about lighting off fireworks is we'd actually light them off in the backyard, and we'd all sit on one side of the pool, and we'd get our beach chairs out, and we'd set them up there, and my grandpa and my uncles would be on the other side of the pool, and they would light off all the fireworks on that side of the pool. And what was really cool about it is not only did you see the firework itself, but you saw the reflection of it in the pool, and so it was like double. And as a kid, I remember sitting there just being in awe of these firework displays that my family would light off. I used to think we spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Knowing my family now, not to bag on them, they're pretty cheap. Like, not my parents, but like my mom's extended family, so it probably wasn't. But you know how like when you're a kid, like, man, things just seem so big. And I just used to remember sitting there just watching them, just firework after firework. And I remember they used to get those little pinwheel ones, that would spin, and they'd put those up, and that would spin around. And just watching it there with my family and being there in that moment and just thinking, man, this is like as good as life gets. And so for me, 4th of July is one of those holidays that it brings back all of these really good memories. Like I said a few minutes ago, it's a reminder to me about like what is good. And I don't know what your memories of 4th of July are. I don't know what your plans for this 4th of July are. 4th of July is always a lot of fun holiday because it's our national holiday as a nation, as the United States. The 4th of July is our national holiday. And when you think of 4th of July, a lot of times, like the first thing that comes to our mind is when we think like, oh, it's 4th of July, it's 4th of July weekend. We think of things like barbecues and parades and fireworks. And those things are good. Those things are all great, and those things are all fun, and I hope you do those, and I hope you enjoy them. But the truth is, like, when you get down to like the foundation of what really is the 4th of July all about, what does it mean to be a national holiday? The meaning and the significance of the 4th of July, it's a lot deeper than barbecues and pool parties. That being our national holiday, 4th of July is when we celebrate like the freedom and the independence that we have as a nation. It goes all the way back to the founding of the United States. I don't know about you, but since Disney released that, Hamilton version on Disney Plus, my kids are like all into it. It's like all we listen to in the car now. We just listen to Hamilton over and over again. And so my kids now are very familiar with some of the facts about the founding of our country. But it all goes back, to July 4th, 1776. This is when Continental Congress adopts the Declaration of Independence. I mean, that's ultimately what 4th of July celebrates. That's when, as the first time, kind of the colonies all got together and said, no, we are declaring that we are a free and independent nation. Now, even though the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, it still took a long time after that for it to become a reality. Because ultimately the Declaration of Independence would lead to war and all that stuff. And it wasn't until September 3rd, 1783 that the Treaty of Paris was signed, and that kind of ended the Revolutionary War. But then it's not even until, I believe it's 1787 that you get the Constitution. So there's a process that goes into the United States becoming the United States. But it all starts with July 4th, 1776, when Continental Congress says, no, we are a free and independent nation. And so that's really what 4th of July is all about. That's what it means to be a national holiday. It's celebrating who we are and the nation that we have founded on the ideas and the ideals and the principles that govern our society. And so really, when I start to peel back the layers of like, what is the 4th of July about? Yeah, I have those great memories as a kid of pool parties and fireworks. And yes, there's barbecues, there's all that good stuff. But when I really think about what 4th of July is all about, the one emotion that comes to my mind over and over again is gratitude. Like, that's really what I feel. If you honestly ask me, like, what does 4th of July mean? I think 4th of July is about gratitude, because what we're celebrating on the 4th of July isn't just the fact that we are a free independent nation. We are celebrating all of the men and women who made that possible and who continue to make that possible. Because again, the process of us even becoming a nation, the process of us continuing to be a nation, it requires hard work, it requires commitment, it requires sacrifice, it requires dedication. And people, men and women, they've dedicated their lives, in some cases given their lives, so that we could be who we are. And so, again, I don't know what your thought is. I don't know what your response is. But when I think of really what this holiday is all about, that's the one word that comes to my mind over and over again is gratitude. Gratitude for the people who've come before me and what they've done and what they have given to me and what they have given to my children. Now, several years back, there was a study that was done on gratitude in the United States. And they actually asked people about gratitude. They asked people how important they thought gratitude was, how often they expressed gratitude, how often others expressed gratitude to them. And what they found is that overwhelmingly, 90% of people believe that living with gratitude is important. That gratitude as kind of an attitude for us as people, that it's important to live that way. But they also found overwhelmingly that gratitude was on the decline. That people talked about how they felt less and less grateful and they experienced less and less gratitude even in their own lives and in their own hearts. They referred to it, the people who did the study referred to it as the gratitude gap. That there's this gap between like, okay, most people acknowledge it's important to have gratitude, but we don't experience it, we don't feel it, and really, even a lot of people who said they feel it, they don't express it. Because let's just be real, if gratitude is not expressed, it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, if I have gratitude to you in my heart for something that you did for me or something you did for my family, but I never tell you about it, is it really gratitude? See, gratitude is one of those things that it has to be expressed for it to be real. It has to be tangible for it to have any kind of benefit at all. So overwhelmingly, people in our country say, yes, gratitude's important. Yes, if you want to live a long, healthy life that's full of great relationships and great experiences, you have to live with gratitude. But gratitude is also declining. We feel it less. We experience it less. We express it less. Other people express it to us less. Now, the thing about gratitude is gratitude isn't just a behavior, and it's not just an attitude. I really think that gratitude is a posture. Whether or not we live with gratitude is really ultimately, it's about how we posture ourselves in the world. It's about, first of all, what we think about ourselves and what we think about other people. Jesus tells this great story in Luke 18. And it's a pretty famous story. It's one of what's called a parable. And parables are stories essentially that Jesus makes up. He makes them up because he wants to make a point. And so in Luke 18, Jesus tells this parable, and here's how it begins. And really, it's a parable about two different postures. And here's what he says. He says, 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. So the temple, in the first century world that Jesus lives in, the temple in Jerusalem is the center of Jewish tradition, Jewish life, and particularly Jewish faith and worship. It was this massive complex right in the heart of Jerusalem. It towered above everything else. So if you were anywhere in the city, you would look up and you would see the temple. And people would go to the temple because they believed this is where God lives. And so I'm going to the temple to meet with God. You would go there to offer sacrifices. You would go there to worship. And it was pretty common to go there to pray. And so in the story Jesus tells, he says, listen, there's 2 guys that go up to the temple to pray. Makes total sense. One of them is a Pharisee. Pharisees are actually experts in Jewish law. These are people who dedicated their entire life to understanding and interpreting and knowing the Jewish law. And the Jewish law is what comes from what's known as the Hebrew Bible, or in the Christian tradition we call it the Old Testament. It's the first part of the Bible. It's these laws that God gives to Moses and the people of Israel way back in the story of the Exodus. And so these Pharisees would dedicate their lives to not only studying it and knowing it, but living their life under like a strict interpretation of that law. And they also tried to teach others to live a strict life according to that law. And when I say they tried to teach others, really what I mean is they guilted others. Because that's a lot of times what religious people do is, I'm not going to tell you what you should do. I'm just going to guilt trip you so you'll do it. So they would like put heavy like guilt trips on people. And this is what you need to do. And if you don't do this. And so the Pharisee going to the temple makes total sense. Pharisees are religious people. They're devoted to all their religious practices. They're going to the temple. Hey, that's the Pharisee is right where he belongs. Even though the Pharisees were really, really strict, they still, in the first century world, are respected by most Jewish people. Most Jewish people look to them like if you needed advice, particularly when it came to faith or God, more than likely you'd go to a Pharisee. So the Pharisee at the temple makes total sense. The other guy that Jesus says comes to the temple is a tax collector. In the first century world, like if there was like a moral spectrum, Pharisees are on one end, tax collectors are on the complete opposite end. Okay? Nobody at any time or any place likes tax collectors. Just don't. If you're here and you work for the IRS, I'm sorry. I love you. We love you. keep doing your job. But nobody, I don't know anybody that's like, woo, taxes, I get to pay taxes. Nobody ever likes tax collectors. Nobody likes to pay taxes. They're necessary. Nobody likes to do it. But in the first century world Jesus lives in, Israel, the land that we know as Israel and the Palestinian territories, is occupied by Rome. And so when you paid taxes, the taxes went to Rome. So essentially, if you're a Jew paying taxes, you're paying taxes to your enemy. You're paying taxes to your conqueror. It's bad enough when you pay taxes to your own nation, to your own people, but when you're paying taxes to the people that conquered you and that actively oppress you, it's even worse. And the tax collectors in Israel were Jewish people who had agreed to work for the Romans. So they're traitors, they're sellouts, and they're also notorious for collecting way too much taxes and keeping some for their own. So tax collectors got rich by lying and cheating and working for the enemy. So tax collectors are hated. They are seen by first century Jews as like the most immoral people in the world. And so when Jesus tells the story, two people go up to the temple to pray. One's a Pharisee. Hey, he belongs. The other's a tax collector. He is incredibly out of place. When he goes to the temple, no one's going to greet him. No one's going to be like, hey, thanks for coming to the temple today. So glad to see you. People are going to judge him. They're going to criticize him. They're going to look at him and they're going to think, what is he doing here? Why is he here? Then when they get to the temple to pray, Jesus tells us, here's what happens when they pray. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. So he sees him, he notices him. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all I get. So the Pharisee stands up to pray, which this may or may not surprise you, but in the first century world, standing was the typical position you would pray in. Again, it was kind of just a respect thing that a lot of us probably sit when we pray, but in the first century world, typically they would stand. So he stands and he begins to pray, and more than likely he prays out loud. Because when you're a Pharisee and you pride yourself on your religious life, you want other people to look at how religious you are, so you say your prayers out loud. So he starts off and he says, Dear God, I thank you that I am not like these other piles of dirt around me, these other just pieces of garbage. And then he lists them. Like, I thank you that would be like, I mean, if you like were to pray tonight and you're like, Dear God, I thank you that I'm not like, Sarah and Jim and Todd, because they're horrible people. This is essentially what he does. Like, he's just slavery. And he even looks at the guy and goes, and God, I especially thank you, I'm not like that guy over there, because that guy is the worst. And so that's his prayer. Now, he goes on and he talks about what he does. He says, I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all I get. Now, understand, him saying that's him bragging about how he goes above and beyond the law. Remember I told you Pharisees lived a strict interpretation of the law. According to the law, you only had to fast once a year. You were only required to fast once a year, and it was on the Day of Atonement. And when it came to giving 1/10, there was only certain things that you had to give 1/10 of, certain crops or animals, things like that, not everything. So this Pharisee says, hey, not only do I fast the one time a year I'm supposed to, but I fast every week, twice a week, and I give 1/10, not of some things, I give 1/10 of everything. So dude's like an overachiever, brown noser, above and beyond, like just does everything he's supposed to. And what's fascinating about his prayer is that nothing he says in his prayer is wrong or incorrect. He's right about all of it. I mean, he is. He goes above and beyond. Like, he's glad he's not like all these other people. I mean, it sounds judgmental, but let's be honest. You've probably looked at people in your life and thought, I'm glad that's not me. I'm glad I'm not. So, like, nothing that he says is technically wrong. He's not lying. Like, everything he says is technically right. So then we turn to the tax collector. And here's how he prays. But the tax collector stood at a distance. And presumably that means he stood at a distance from everyone and everything. Nobody wanted him there. He knew nobody wanted him there. He was well aware of that, so he stands at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but he beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. So he won't go near anyone. He looks down, won't even look at God, and he's just beating his chest, which is a sign of sorrow, is what it is. It's just a sign of just complete sorrow and brokenness. And he can't, all he can say over and over again is, God, have mercy on me, because I'm a sinner. I have screwed up royally. I have messed up so bad. I have lied. I have cheated. I have stolen. I have probably ruined and destroyed people's lives and families. And so as Jesus tells this story, the first century Jewish audience that's listening to him is thinking to himself, that sounds about right. You got a Pharisee that goes to the temple and the Pharisee prays and his prayer's great. And then you got a tax collector that goes to the temple and he prays and he's just nothing but a piece of garbage, and his prayer reflects that. These are two polar opposite people with two polar opposite postures in their life, two polar opposite lifestyles. They pray two polar opposite prayers, and it makes total sense. Until you get to the end of the story. And this is the point when Jesus wraps up his story, this is the point that the audience would have absolutely flipped. Because here's how Jesus ends this story. I tell you that this man, talking about the tax collector, rather than the other, the Pharisee, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. This is the point that the crowd would have got really, really angry. They're with Jesus up to this point. That's Pharisee is good. Way to go. Twice a week. Good job, buddy. Yeah, woo, giving a tenth of everything. Way to go. That's right. You are a horrible sinner. You should be sorrowful. You should. Whoa. This guy went home justified? This guy went home right before God? This guy went home in a right standing with God, and the Pharisee didn't? How is that possible? See, this is the point at which the story just begins to blow people's mind, because they're thinking, how does that even work? One guy is like above and beyond, like overachiever in terms of righteousness and everything he does, and the other guy is a liar and a cheat. How, in the name of all that is holy, does he go home with a right standing before God, justified and right, and this guy doesn't? And the difference that Jesus is pointing out, the difference between the two guys, is their posture. It's how they see themselves. It's how they see their lives. It's how they see their actions. What's funny is if you go back and you look at the Pharisee's prayer, the Pharisee opens his prayer with God. He recognizes God. I'm talking to God. I'm speaking to God. But nothing else he says has anything to do with God. Everything else he says is about himself. I thank you that I'm not like this, I'm not like this, I'm not like that. And the reason I'm not like this and the reason I don't do all these things is because I do all these other things. So his whole prayer is literally about everything he doesn't do and about everything that he does. At no point in there is there any, other than the acknowledgement at the beginning, God, I'm talking to you. Everything else is about himself. Whereas if you look at the tax collector's prayer is nothing but a petition to God that acknowledges, God, I am so broken that whatever mess I have created, whatever mess I'm in, there's no way I get out of this myself, that I need your help. See, what you see in the tax collector and the Pharisee, and what Jesus is highlighting when he tells this story, is the difference in their posture. It's kind of in some ways, it's a pride versus humility thing. And really what Jesus is highlighting in the Pharisee, what you see in the Pharisee is what we call entitlement. That the Pharisee views himself as entitled. Entitled is, when you talk about entitlement is the belief that I am inherently better than other people and I deserve special privileges or treatment. Literally, this is how entitlement's defined. It's an unrealistic, unmerited, inappropriate expectation of favorable living conditions and favorable treatment at the hands of others. A sense of entitlement comes from the fact of, because of who I am and because of what I do, there are things I deserve. And see, this is what you see from the Pharisee. The Pharisee does not believe that he needs anything from God because I've done it all myself. I don't do these things. I do these things. I don't need God. I'm good. Whatever the reward is in the afterlife or the next life, whatever blessings I need in this life, I've got them because of my merit. Because look at what I've done. Look at what I haven't done. I have no need for God. I have done everything myself. And see, this is what a sense of entitlement is. Entitlement, again, is this belief that because of who I am, because of what I have done, I deserve things. I am owed things. And so entitled people get really angry when they don't get what they think they want. When things don't go my way, the entitled person's response is, well, how can this be? This shouldn't happen to me. It's okay if it happens to the tax collector or the evildoer or any one of those other. It's okay if it happens to them because look at them. But this shouldn't happen to me because I'm me. Because look at who I am and look at what I've done. And the crazy thing about entitled people is they've done research on entitled people. And when you live with like a strong sense of entitlement, entitled people experience more relational conflict, they experience more disappointment and unhappiness, and they battle depression more. Because when you live with a sense of entitlement, you have this belief that I am owed these things. And when I don't get these things, when I don't get what I deserve, when I don't get what I want, we become angry and we become bitter. And the thing about entitlement is it's actually this perpetual cycle. Because what happens when you feel entitled, you feel like you deserve something, and then you don't get it, what you end up doing is you end up consoling yourself and saying, well, I should have gotten it, and it's not fair that I didn't get it, and life is against me, God is against me, my boss is against me, this person is against me, whatever. You console yourself and you convince yourself that you should have gotten it, and then it actually builds your entitlement. So whereas you would think that like being disappointed would kind of erase entitlement, and what they've actually found is that it increases it. Because you just keep convincing yourself, no, I should have, and I didn't, but now I'm owed even more. And it's this perpetual cycle that keeps us experiencing unhappiness and disappointment. And it's crazy. If you've ever seen someone that operates with like an inflated sense of entitlement, it's crazy. I remember years ago, I stopped at a gas station here in town, and I filled my car up with gas, and I was really thirsty, so I went into the mini mart to get something to drink. And so I went and I got my drink, and I'm standing in line, and there's about 4 people in line in front of me. And we're just kind of sitting there, everything's kind of quiet. All of a sudden, this woman comes barging into the door, and she is screaming and shouting and yelling. And those of us in line and the guy behind the counter, we're like, I don't even know what's going on. Finally, she gets enough out, and we realize that she thinks she's been overcharged at the machine. She thinks that she put in, like, I want this, and she got charged too much, and so she's really upset about it, and she's wanting the guy to give her a refund. And the guy's behind the counter is explaining to her, he says, hey, listen, that is actually separate from what goes on in here. It's like owned by different things. So, and he gives her the number. He says, if you have a problem with the pump, here's who you call, and make sure you have your receipt, or I can print it out for you, and they can help you out. And that answer was not satisfactory to this woman at all. And so she keeps yelling at him. And at this point, it started to get really, really nasty because the guy behind the counter, his skin was not white, and he talked with an accent. So it was pretty obvious that he was not from this country. And so not only now is she yelling at him because she's angry, but she's literally shouting racist things at him about how he came from another country and he should learn to speak English, and it was just horrible. And there's some of us in line that are like trying to diffuse the situation and like calm her down, but she's screaming these horrible, horrible, mean things at him. And for a little while, the guy behind the counter, he's just kind of standing there. And then she keeps saying these things, people trying to calm her down, and finally the guy behind the counter snaps, and he shouts back at her. And he shouts back at her, this is one obscenity. It was the big one, which if you don't know what that is, you could just ask someone when we're done here, say, what's the big one? But it was the big one. And I'll be honest with you, like when he said it, that's all he said. He just, said it to her. And in my mind, I'm like, I mean, not that I'm justifying using that word, but it kind of seemed like an appropriate response. I mean, this woman was way out of control. So it went along with the conversation. But I kid you not, when he said it, this woman stopped and she froze and she looked at him and she said, how dare you say that to me? And I remember at this point, I was stunned. And I was like, what? And she would say, how dare you say that? You don't ever say that to me. And she stormed out angry. And I remember at that point, honestly, I was like confused. I was completely, because I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, lady, you walked in here and you lit this guy up and down, and he was helpful. He was very helpful. He was a very nice guy. He was extremely helpful. You didn't like his answer, which I'm sorry, like that's just the way it is. And then literally you went off on a racist tirade. And then when he responded, how dare him? Like it was just like witnessing that was mind-blowing, because here you had this woman, again, I don't know anything about this woman. I never saw her before then. I never saw her after then. But who had such this sense of entitlement that she could do and say whatever she wanted and it didn't matter. Because I'm me and I can say these things and I'm owed these things. But if you ever say anything to me, well, how dare you? See, now, and I'll admit that's kind of like almost an over-exaggerated thing, but that's a perfect example of entitlement. Is that here's this woman who just feels like whatever. Like I said, I don't know anything about her, but because of who she is, because of what she's done, because of her status of she's the customer and this guy was the worker, I don't know what her mind frame was, but she just felt like she had the right to do or say anything, and this guy couldn't. And see, we live in this culture that feeds us this constant sense of entitlement. Psychologists have actually studied about where does entitlement come from, and there's no like overall general consensus. A lot of people, they'll feel like it has to do with social factors. It has to do with like the family that you're a part of and you know, what you get or don't get as a kid. But if social factors play any significant role, which most psychologists and sociologists believe that it does, that we live in this culture that just feeds us this constant sense of entitlement, that we deserve happiness. And we deserve all of this, and we deserve all of that. And so when we don't get it, we become angry. Most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, now we may not be as far as this woman I met at the gas station was. We may not be that far, but we're far more entitled than we would ever want to admit. That we think we are owed things, we think we are deserved things, and the crazy thing about entitlement is the stuff that applies to us doesn't apply to anyone else. Well, I don't care if you get it, because you're you, and I'm me. And I shouldn't have to wait in lines, but you can. I shouldn't have to do this, but you can. I can say whatever I want, and you can't. See, most of us, if we're honest and we took a deep look in our life, entitlement is a part of who we are. It's a part of our culture. For all the things that are great about the culture of the country in which we live and the society in which we live, I would argue that entitlement is a lot greater here than it is in most places around the world. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in other places around the world. It does, but it's far more prominent here. I remember years ago, we used to go down every spring break. We'd take a group of students here from the church, and we'd go down into Mexico, mostly into Tijuana. Sometimes we went down into Tecate, and we'd spend spring break building a home for our family. And we'd go into these very, very poor communities. Most of these communities developed because they were promised that work would be there, and so people moved there, and they built literally like shanties. But then the factory never showed up, and so now you have all these people that have no income, and there's just extreme poverty, and there are these little shanty villages all over the place. And most of them don't have water. There's no electricity. There's no running sewer system or anything. So it's bad conditions. And we'd go in there, and we'd build these little houses. And they weren't much, honestly. They were 11 by 22. And they were 2 rooms. They had a concrete floor. We'd lay a slab down there, and then we'd frame up the walls, and we'd put, tar paper, and then we'd put chicken wire and stucco on the outside and a roof, and we'd put some rolled roof on it. And it provided some warmth. It provided some protection. It wasn't bad. But I remember each time we'd go down there and we'd build this house. Every year we did this, and I probably went down there literally probably 12 or 13 times. Every family we ever built for was so incredibly grateful. They were grateful because one family we built for one time was living in a bus. One family was just living in like tarps that they had wrapped up and everything. And so we were building these little homes. And their gratitude, every time it floored me, because every time people would express gratitude, they'd say, thank you so much for doing this. We can't believe we can't believe that these high school students would give up their spring break and come down here and do this. Every time it floored me, because all I remember thinking to myself was, if I had to live in this house, I would be angry. If this was my house to live in, I would be upset. And I'd be like, God, why did you do this to me? Why is the world against me? But here's this family and a lot of the families we built for, there were like, sometimes there was multiple families living together, sometimes there were bigger families. So like 11 by 22, it wasn't even just like, 1 or 2 people. You'd have sometimes like 10 people that were living in this little house. But their gratitude was, thank you so much. You don't know what this means to us. This is such a huge blessing. And every time I would leave, almost literally almost in tears, because I thought to myself, man, what's wrong with me? That here's these people that can take so much joy out of this little thing, but if this is what I had, if this is what I had to live in, I'd be ticked. I'd be angry. And quite honestly, I was embarrassed with myself. Because I don't know that if it was up until then that I realized just how entitled I am. See, again, most of us are far more entitled than we'd ever want to be. One of the reasons, there's multiple reasons. One of the reasons Jesus constantly gets in so much trouble is because everything about him is counter to this religious idea of entitlement. Because it's not just like society that's based on entitlement. Again, if you go back to the story Jesus tells about the Pharisee and the tax collector, the whole first century religious system, and really in a lot of ways, I would argue a lot of religion in the world we live in today is based on entitlement. I do things, God owes me things. I obey God, God owes me this. I give to God, God owes me that. I do this, God owes me that. Like it's based on the sense of entitlement. But then Jesus comes along and tells stories of like this Pharisee and this tax collector and says, yeah, well, this Pharisee went home in bad shape, but this tax collector who's done probably nothing good in his life goes home justified before God. And then Jesus also says stuff like this, Matthew 21:31. Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God ahead of you. When you say things like that, like that's going to get people's attention. Because again, tax collectors and prostitutes, these are the people that when you see them, you're like, stay away. These people are horrible. They're terrible. And Jesus is like, oh yeah? They're getting into heaven before you, just FYI, for what it's worth. And that's why people are so angry, because everything about Jesus breaks down this whole sense of entitlement. Because nothing about the way God functions, either in the Old Testament, in ancient Israel, or in the New Testament, through Jesus or through the church, none of it has anything to do with entitlement. In fact, entitlement destroys any hope we have of living in connection with God. Because here's the thing, when you feel entitled to something, you can never enjoy it. You can't. If you feel entitled to a big house, you'll never enjoy a big house. You'll just be bitter that you don't have a bigger house. If you feel entitled to God's love, you will never enjoy it. See, God operates from what we call grace. Grace is a word that shows up all over the Bible. And grace is about freely giving. And see, one of the key ingredients to experiencing grace is gratitude. Because grace, like the Pharisee, acknowledges that, you know what? I don't deserve this. I haven't earned this. I'm not this great person that's entitled to this love and forgiveness. But when you operate from a place of gratitude, you're free to receive that grace. Part of the reason that we struggle with grace is because we're so entitled. Because we think we have to earn things. But the reality with love is you can never earn love. You can't do it. You can't earn love from anybody. People love you because they choose to. God loves you because he chooses to. See, the whole point is that you and I are going to live our life with either the posture of the Pharisee or the posture of the tax collector. We're going to carry ourselves with one of those two kinds of postures. And it has to do with what we think about ourselves. It has to do with what we think about each other. It has to do with what we're able to receive from other people, what we're able to give to other people. It impacts what we're able to receive from God and what we're able to give from God. If you live with the posture of the Pharisee, you live with the posture of entitlement. And I'm not trying to be mean or critical or judgmental. I'm just telling you, that is a depressing, lonely, empty way to live. The other posture is the posture of the tax collector. Now, I'm not saying you have to be as down about yourself as the tax collector was. But I'm saying here's the tax collector that carries himself with this posture of humility. That says, you know what? I don't deserve, I'm not anything great, or I'm just a person, and I need God, and I need other people, and when you posture yourself like that, that's when you're able to receive love and grace and forgiveness. You and I get to choose the posture that we live with. You get to choose the way that we stand before others and the way that we stand before God. And here's the thing, especially if we didn't come out of a year like this last year, the experiences of this last year and everything that's gone into it can either make you bitter or grateful. You choose. Are you going to live entitled because of what you feel like you lost? Or are you going to choose to be grateful for what it is that you have?
Will you stand with us?
To hide this weary soul, this bag of bones. I tried with all my might
really do. Hey, so as Scott said, we're kind of at this place right now where we have a choice and an opportunity to either stick in this place of bitterness or move on to this place of gratitude. Now, I know everybody here, everyone who is singing the song, who has a pulse in here, knows what I mean when I say that this last year was just flat out tough. It was hard. I can attest to that. It was some of the toughest moments of my life. But what's beautiful about following a life that honors Jesus, that imitates Jesus, is that it allows us a way out of the brokenness that we find ourselves into. Now, for a lot of us, we're still kind of clinging on to that past. And what's difficult is that, what happened in the past, we can't change. But what we do now, what we do as we move forward, can give purpose to those difficult moments you and I find ourselves in. It can give purpose to the life that follows Jesus and that is beautiful and that has purpose and that's filled with grace. So this next part that we're gonna sing says, get up, get up, get up, get up out of that grave. You guys got that? All right, just like this. I'll do it again. Get up, get up, get up, get up out of that grave. That's all I need to do. And I'm gonna encourage you to take a step forward, a step in a maybe uncomfortable direction, maybe a scary direction, but I wanna encourage you just to sing that with us. And for those of us, which is probably all of us, who need to get up out of that grave of bitterness and frustration and anger, for those of us who need that, I would encourage you to just lift this moment up to that. Say, I'm gonna get out of this grave and walk away from the bitterness and the anger and frustration that I find myself in. So let's all sing this together. You guys got that? Can you guys do that? All right, here we go. 1, 2,